our National Consultant for Bilingual Resources. I'm Debbie Matulowicz. I'm here in the marketing department here in the New York office of Sadlier, and with us also is Matt Wallace, who's also in our department. And today's presentation is being recorded. We will have it archived and saved to our website as well as our YouTube channel. All of our participants are on mute, so you don't have to worry about your background noises. And with that, I will go ahead and turn the controls over to Victor, because our presentation is filled with information. And Victor, ready for you to start. Thank you.
Well, good morning from San Diego. I am in San Diego doing work, but I am happy to join you today on this webinar. And for those of you on the East Coast, I guess it's good afternoon. Today we're going to talk a little bit about how Creemos and discipleship work together. And actually, there is a very good bridge that connects both Creemos and discipleship, which we'll discuss in just a few minutes. But the whole point of Creemos and the whole point of catechesis really is about making disciples, creating disciples with our catechetical efforts. For those of you who may not know me, a little bit of a biographical background, I have been with Sadlier. This month exactly marks 10 years that I have been with Sadlier. Previous to that, I taught in Catholic high schools in Northern California. I taught religion, theology, scripture for not K through, but 9 through 12 in high schools. And prior to that, I did parish catechesis at my parish, as well as worked with youth ministry in my parish. So discipleship has been always a goal of what I do in my ministry, getting people to see and love and understand the message of Jesus and the message of Christ, and then learning how to live that life out, especially in today's world. And so I've always had the issue of discipleship as a part of my ministry. And then, of course, I've always been known to work with Creemos as a very viable text for catechesis, especially among the bilingual community. So this presentation is, I guess, by way of introduction, is what I'm saying, is marrying two of those concepts, the discipleship that I've always had in my ministry, and Creemos, which is a good and useful tool for bilingual catechesis. If after the presentation you would like to stay in touch, or you would like to drop me a line or have some question that maybe is not addressed during the presentation, you may connect with me on these three ways, either by this web address, sadlier.com/Victor, which you can find my email address and other information about me. If you're on Twitter, you can send me a message on Twitter, which is Victor@Sadlier. And then for those of you who may be familiar with our blogs, we have blogs that we publish weekly. In Spanish, we have creemosycompartimos.com. Creemosycompartimos.com is a weekly reflection on some catechetical topic that may be going on that week, that month. It's usually, some saint, or maybe it's a feast or some holiday that's going on. We provide a little bit of a reflection, and then we provide some downloadable, usually a prayer, but it could be an activity that you can use for catechesis. I can show you an example of that by going to sadlierreligion.com, and you can see here on Sadlier Religion where our blogs are. We have a Sadlier blog for just general ideas for how to use We Believe. A We Believe and Share blog is the English counterpart to Creemos, and then of course this third one is Creemos y Compartimos, which is the Spanish blog that we have. So those are the three blogs that we have at Sadlier. So those are ways that you can stay in touch. And now a little bit about our presentation today. I think in today's day and age with catechesis, we need to move towards not just a plain old catechesis that we've been doing for so long, but I think the call is, and we've been hearing this call for the last several years, we need to move into an evangelizing catechesis. And what do I mean when I'm talking about an evangelizing catechesis? All our catechetical efforts should really have a component where they're applying the new evangelization. The new evangelization, as you know, is an effort that started, really I claim it started after Vatican II. Vatican II was really the initiator of the new evangelization. But publicly, we can start hearing Pope John Paul II, or St. John Paul II, start speaking about the new evangelization during his time as Pope, and of course echoed by Benedict the 16th, and now, very interestingly, and with a different twist, by Pope Francis. So to me, the new evangelization is changing what we're doing to meet the needs of the people that are in front of us. So I think it's that whole issue that we've talked about before in the past, where you know that whole what is that image people say about the cart and the horse? Sometimes you put the cart before the horse, or however that goes. Sometimes when we do catechesis or evangelization, we tend to use programs that are old and antiquated because in our mind they worked before. And so they worked before, and so I'm going to transfer them now and use them with this group today. And sometimes that's where the error is at. And I think that's what the new evangelization is asking us to examine. Is it a mistake to use all these old tricks with a new group? And maybe tricks is not the correct word there, but all these activities or strategies that we've used in the past, both in evangelization and in catechesis, is it good for this new group? And I think the answer the new evangelization is saying is no, it is not good for this new group, and that we need to approach it in a little bit of a different way each time that we go out to evangelize. So the group that's before you now, whether it be in confirmation or middle school ministry or in the K through 5 ministry, that group that's in front of you now is different than the group that was there last year. And so we have to adapt our efforts, our catechetical efforts, to meet the needs of that group. And Pope Francis specifically has a different, even a little bit more of a different twist on the new evangelization, I think. I think his twist on the new evangelization is that second bullet point that you see on your screen. And I left them in Spanish because I think the Spanish captures it a little bit better. It's about mercy, caridad y cariño. So caridad is charity. Cariño translates into affection, like a deep affection that you have for somebody. It's a very well used word in Spanish. Like for example, when two people may be dating when they're young, they'll call each other cariño. They'll just refer to them like the English sweetheart. They'll call each other sweetheart. So it has that tone of that word. And the reason I think Pope Francis is about these two words, because I think sometimes you can do charity, and I think you've seen this in your ministry. People can do charity and not really necessarily have that affection. Like they kind of do it out of obligation, like we just have to do this, or this is something we have to do. And I think what Pope Francis is saying, it's not just something we have to do, but we have to do it out of the love of Jesus, out of the love of our hearts. And that's where the cariño part comes in. And I know this because in reading Evangelii Gaudium, in number 85, Pope Francis has made so many statements that have been so so interesting and so jaw-dropping to me. I don't know about you guys, but to me, this one out of Evangelii Gaudium number 85, where he says, one of the more serious temptations which stifles boldness and zeal is a defeatism which turns us into querulous and disillusioned pessimists, or sourpusses. That's actually in a papal document, the word sourpuss. And he's saying we shouldn't be sourpuss. And actually in Spanish, and I don't know if that's where the word originally came, I presume it did, because he obviously speaks Spanish. The Spanish word to me is vinegar face. Like when you eat a really, really sour pickle and you make that face. I think that's what Pope Francis is saying. We can't be with that face, that attitude, that evangelization and catechesis is something that we just got to put up with. We have to have this caridad and cariño for catechesis. And I think that, to me, embodies the new evangelization and the effort that we should be doing it. So what does that bring us? You know, that third bullet point there, it should bring us a new energy, a new dynamism to what we're doing in catechesis. It should inspire us to really, you know, I'm always reminded the scene from Emmaus, and I know different people have taken different parts of that. But for me, it's that last line of that story of Emmaus when the first guy asked the second guy, do you remember when we saw him on the road and our hearts were afire? That to me is such a clinching line, not only for that story, but for many stories in the New Testament, because that's what we're trying to do in catechesis. We're trying to set their hearts afire. We're trying to evangelize so that there's this new flame and energy within the folks that we're doing. And if we're not doing that, then I'm wondering if, I don't know if you could use this term, I'm wondering if we're doing old evangelization as opposed to new evangelization. And so hopefully with the inspiration of Pope Francis, we can combine the efforts of evangelizing and the efforts of catechesis. Now, when we're speaking about catechesis, to me, the definition of catechesis includes these three dimensions. So for me, it includes a good solid information, a good formation, and a good transformation. But in order for those three to work, they need to be balanced. It needs to be a balanced catechesis. So let me go back and kind of describe each one of these and then tell you where I think they're out of balance. So information for me is all the knowledge that we pour into kids' heads about our faith. And it's all the, whether it's in written or stories that we say or any other forms that we kind of give them information. That's just the content of our faith, which I think is very important, and it's key that we do it. Again, if we're being challenged by the new evangelization, we've got to ask ourselves questions about how are we doing that, especially in today's day and age where information today means something different than information meant, for example, in 1990. Because today information is not just in a book, in paper, but it's digital and it's social media and it's other forms. So how are we really using information to be more in keeping with modern day technology or with the modern day context, really? I'll give you a classic example of what I'm talking about in translating this information into something new. You know, I think there's still a lot of catechetical programs out there that are teaching the rote prayers. You know, they're teaching the Our Father in a memorized way, the Our Father, the Hail Mary, the Glory Be. They give them a sheet. You know, you Xerox a sheet and you tell them, go memorize the Our Father. And to me, that's kind of old world technology, and it's even old evangelization, because the only thing that these rote memorization teaches them is how to memorize a prayer. What we're missing there is we're missing the meaning of the prayer. We sometimes get away by just teaching them the words, and then we kind of never teach them what the meaning is behind that prayer. And to me, this does a bigger disservice to that child, to that adolescent, or to that adult. Because, and I'm a case example of this. I think when I was 27 years old, out of the seminary, teaching in high school, is when I think I first started to learn what the Our Father meant, what it really meant. Because before that, if people asked me, do you know what the Our Father is? I would say, yeah, I know what the Our Father. No, they would say, do you know the Our Father? That's the question they would ask. And I would say, yeah, I know what the Our Father, I know what the words are, but I didn't know what the meaning was. And so I think we need to look at that information a little bit more carefully and say, do we really want to present it in this cold, dry way, or I think as Pope Francis would say, in this kind of sourpuss way, or do we want to present this information in a new and more engaging way. For example, just the Our Father alone. Instead of teaching that in a rote, memorized way, could we teach it as a song? Could it be something that we teach them via them singing? We find a song, Our Father, and if it's our year to have them memorize the Our Father and learn the Our Father, then maybe in our catechetical sessions we begin singing that song, we sing it at the middle, we sing it at the end, we send it home for them to sing it at home. I'll tell you, once you sing a song at least 10, 15 times, it kind of stays in your brain. You know, you remember all those songs from when you were growing up that you still have in your brain. And so using music, which actually isn't that much of a modern tool, but using music to teach a rote prayer might be a better way than just teaching it in the old rote ways. And so that's how we take information and make it a little bit more of a modern adaptation. And then formation. I think formation is what we do when we're reaching the heart, when we're touching them in their heart, going back to the story of Emmaus, when we're setting their hearts aflame. So anything that we do that really resonates in their heart. My fear is that in current catechesis, we might have way too much information and very little formation. So maybe we're not doing enough of this feeding of the heart and touching their heart and eliciting a response from the heart. So I think just look at your catechetical setting. If you're in a school, of course, if we're talking about Creemos, you're probably in a parish. But in a parish, where you normally have catechesis is in the classrooms that are used for the school in the parish. So for a bilingual child coming to that room, what they perceive as what they're doing is not necessarily they're coming to meet Jesus in their heart, but they're coming to learn about Jesus in their head. They perceive it as more school. And so I think it's important that we make some sort of transition both in their heads and in their hearts, that this is not school as in an academic subject, but this is a faith formation session where they're coming to learn something different than what they learn in school. And I often tell teachers in Catholic high school, in Catholic elementary schools, I often tell them, how do you make that transition from 1 hour studying math and then saying, okay, students, close your math book, now open your religion book, because the child isn't making that transition from head to heart. And so it must be a big challenge for them. But I also think it's a challenge for us in the parish where we're using these classrooms. So the tip that I always use is, use the room, but not like a classroom. Don't sit them at desks. Maybe form a circle around chairs in the front, or have them sit on the floor in the front. When I was growing up, I used to love that area which used to be called the story hour in my elementary school classroom, where the teacher would gather us around and we would all, she or he would read us a story. That's the kind of feeling we want to have during catechesis, that it's like story hour, that it's a formation time and not so much an information. And I'm not saying, let's downplay information or let's water down information. Let's give it out there, but let's give it out there coupled with a formation, because I believe that if you do good information and good formation, it will automatically lead to a good transformation. And so all these three work together, but they need to be balanced, and we need to be looking for ways to be able to balance these three in our catechetical efforts. So which leads us to the question about discipleship. So then the goal of catechesis really should be about discipleship. That's what we're doing, as I said at the beginning. I think I've been about this my whole ministry, from when I was doing youth ministry in high school many, many years ago. The goal of all our efforts is to have them live a life where they're following Christ. And that's the point of why we do this. We don't necessarily, I think a lot of us get confused that we're doing this just to get them to the next sacrament, and then we pray to Jesus or pray to the Holy Spirit that they'll continue to whatever the next sacrament is. But we really don't look at this overarching theme that in their life they're becoming disciples. and we need to look at their catechetical effort as disciples. I remember a person, I think she was an elderly nun one time, came up to me and she said to me after a presentation, she said, you know how I do this whole discipleship? She said, it's just a matter of language for me. When I greet my students in the morning, and I don't remember if she was in school, like a school teacher, or if she was in parish catechetical ministry, but I remember her saying, I don't do this by, when I refer to them in the morning, I don't say good morning students or good morning children. She says every morning, if I'm going to refer to them as a group, I refer to them as my little disciples. I'll say good morning my disciples, or when I want them to quiet down in class, I'll say disciples, it's time to gather back together again, which I thought was a very interesting way to be able to do that whole change of atmosphere within the catechetical classroom. But here are three things that I think need to be essential if we're going to do discipleship. This is the way I kind of define discipleship and some ways to get to discipleship. First of all, discipleship needs to be centered on Jesus, of course. That's the whole point of our discipleship. And I know I'm stating the obvious here, but sometimes I wonder if it is the obvious. You know, my big famous example that some of you might have heard if you've heard me before is sometimes we do lessons in catechesis. We prepare topics, like for example, we do a lesson on the 10 Commandments, for example, and we spend an hour and a half talking about the 10 Commandments, and we don't connect it to Jesus. You know, because the 10 Commandments are in the Old Testament, sometimes we forget that there's a connection there with Jesus. And so when you do that, you know, you're not even doing catechesis at that point, because all our catechesis has to be about Jesus. It has to be bringing us closer to Christ. And if you're doing stuff in your catechetical classroom that's not bringing you closer to Christ, then you're wasting your time and you're wasting their time in catechesis. So we need to evaluate our catechetical lesson so that it is bringing them closer to Christ at all time, because that's what will put them on the road to discipleship. And of course, not only just the person of Christ, but what he taught, and that is based on what we find in the Scriptures. The Scriptures are a good guide for us in terms of the teachings of Christ and how to follow those teachings of Christ. In 2005, it's almost 10 years now since the bishops have put out the National Directory for Catechesis. And in the National Directory for Catechesis, there is a section there called the 6 Tasks of Catechesis. And these 6 tasks of catechesis, to me, are very interesting. I just heard my colleague, Carol Eipers, call them, you know, the 6 dimensions, because tasks sounds like something we have to do, like they're like homework. They're like onerous, you know, like as Pope Francis would say, you know, sourpuss things to do. She calls them dimensions, Dr. Eipers does, which I think is a better word for them. The way I like to look at them is for those of you that do any knitting out there or any type of weaving, for me it's like the strands that you need for knitting a sweater or a blanket, or if you're weaving some sort of rug or whatever. It's the various colors that you use to make that garment a very beautiful garment. And in this case, for catechesis, there are 6 strands that you need, 6 strands that need to go in to make this beautiful garment, which at the end hopefully will be discipleship. So for me, that garment is discipleship, and these strands help us get to that. And I think they're fundamental in understanding how to do catechesis. And if you have a chance, if you have never read the section on the 6 tasks, I urge you to find a copy of the National Directory of Catechesis and look at that section. It's only like 3 or 4 pages long, and read that page, because it gives you a really good sense of these 6 tasks. Let me just go over what these 6 tasks are. These 6 tasks, now in the National Directory, the bishops put them out as big long paragraphs. And what we did at Sadlier several years ago is we condensed them down into one word. And I really love these words because they're, to me, like action words, things we need to do. So these are the words. We need to know our faith. We need to celebrate our faith. We need to live our faith, pray our faith, share our faith, and choose our faith. You can also substitute the phrase, disciples need to, and then add these words. They need to know their faith. They need to celebrate their faith. A good disciple lives out his or her faith. A good disciple prays his faith, her faith, and so forth with share, and choose. So these 6 tasks, I think, are a guidepost for how we do catechesis. Now, what I'm going to do in the rest of the presentation is show you how Creemos ties into these 6 tasks. Like, where do we intentionally and very visually and clearly see these 6 tasks within Creemos? And so the first one that I chose is, and of course here you see the cover of Creemos that we currently have out. And so here I'm going to show you the 4 sections of Creemos. So these are the 4 sections of Creemos that I'm going to address. In Creemos, there are really 3 main sections within the chapter, and then there's an additional little ending piece that we called Haciendo Discípulos. And we believe Haciendo Discípulos is called Project Disciple. And so what these mean, Nos congregamos is kind of like the introduction, the opening prayer piece. Creemos is the main bulk of the teaching. And then respondemos is how we respond to the lesson. And of course, like I just said, Haciendo Discípulos or Project Disciple is the culminating activity. So these are the 4 sections that are in Creemos. And then how they connect. And here you can see the 4 sections. Here is we gather or nos congregamos as the first section. There's the Creemos section. And within the Creemos section, there are 4 what we call faith statements. And I'll talk a little bit more about those in just a second. And here we see the respondemos piece. So here's how we respond to what we've learned in the lesson. So how do they connect to the 6 tasks? Well, let's take prayer, for example. In the prayer section, which is one of the 6 tasks, each chapter begins with prayer and actually ends with prayer. And again, going back to what I said about the new evangelization, these, the aim of Creemos is that they be authentic prayers, prayers that come from the child, that they're creative and they incorporate music and artwork. I just heard a comment the other day about Creemos and how engaging the artwork is, and I'll bring this up a little bit later, but I'll just say a little bit about this now. The bilingual child, because they're learning 2 languages at the same time in their school, when they come to catechesis, sometimes language may be, I don't know if I want to use the word barrier, but it is certainly an obstacle that they have to contend with because of the 2 languages that they're doing acquisition in their school. So what catechists say to me is sometimes that there's too many words on a page. Well, I say to them, don't use the words, and I'll show you an example when we get to a page of Creemos in just a second. Don't use the words on the page, use the images that are in. I know that for Creemos, we have gone intentionally and chosen images that speak to the content on the page. So in other words, we didn't just write the content for the page and then just say, oh, look, we have a blank space. Maybe we should slap a picture of Jesus on here or put Mary in there or something holy. No, whatever the content of the page is, that's what the picture is about, and vice versa. So you could easily just have them focus on the image, and you could actually teach a lesson just with the image. And as well for the prayers. You could do a prayer just with the image that's on that page as opposed to going through the actual words of the prayer, which I think is very important. And those of you that have technology, have smart boards and can do an LCD projector, you can buy Creemos in an ebook, and you can put the ebook image on the screen as the child looks at it in their on their book. So when we're talking about prayers and Creemos, to me, that final bullet point there, we need to work to use prayers that touch the heart. Again, not rote prayer, not just reading a prayer, not just reciting a prayer, but prayers that speak from the heart. I think that's the goal of Creemos. And then in the Know Your Faith, which is, this is the content part of the faith that is in the 6 tasks of catechesis. So the 4 faith statements, as I spoke to you about, that are within the sections of Creemos, these 4 faith statements are what we call the doctrine. This is the core doctrine that's presented in engaging ways, which incorporates activities. You know, a child today is not going to learn from a teacher lecturing at them about doctrine for an hour or an hour and a half. So in Creemos, we have added a lot of activities that they will be able to incorporate to be able to reach the child with that message. So we use a lot of multiple intelligence. And for those of you who are familiar with multiple intelligence, basically what multiple intelligence is telling us is that each child has a strength in the way they learn. It may be through music, it may be through visual images, it may be through movement, it may be through reflection, it may be through working in small groups. But we need to use those in catechesis. And Creemos does a good job of putting activities out there that kind of reach out in each one of those various multiple intelligence. So the symbols of our faith being very important, as well as music, dance, hands-on activities, which are part of learning the faith. So it's not just doctrine in the sense of, here, memorize these 10 statements or memorize this, or it's more engaging with them so that they get the meaning of them as well. And then, of course, celebrate. I always tell catechists that I work with is that our faith is a faith of celebration in the church and out of the church. The joke that I always say is that for us, especially Latinos, my background is Mexican, you know, we baptize babies not because we're saving them from the fires of hell in the Latino community. We baptize babies because we know afterwards there's going to be a big fiesta with a piñata and everything. So we're more a people of celebration. So rituals and celebration are key to the faith. And in Creemos, we are conscious of that by our opening and closing prayers, the activities that are on the web, which really have a lot of the celebration piece that we want to accentuate in catechesis. And then, of course, our seasonal chapters. There are chapters for each one of the seasons, such as Advent, Lent, Easter, Ordinary Time, so that that really brings the flair as to what we're doing when we're celebrating these special seasons. And then on the creemosweb.com website, there's all the saints that we need to follow as well. So all these add together to bring about this seasonal flair that we're looking to do in celebrating our faith. And then, of course, share. In the Respondemos section of the sections that I pointed out in Creemos, it's a way for us to then have the child take what they've learned and really adapt it to their life. So how do they take it to their home? How do they take it to their school friends? How do they live out what they've learned in the lesson? And how do they respond with this? And usually there are some very creative and engaging ways for them to be able to take that information and take it with them and follow along with it when they take it home. So let me just show you an example of that. So here's an example of what you're seeing on the screen is a page from Creemos. This one happens to be on the 10 Commandments. But here you can see where it says, Jesús nos enseña sobre la ley de Dios, and in English, Jesus teaches us about the law. You can see the law of God. You can see here the faith statement. So that little purplish color headline, that's a faith statement, and there's 4 of those which kind of bring in that knowledge. But then there's how do you share this? So as Catholics, how do we understand these sections? Now, this is very important because sometimes, and well, most times, our Catholic children are mixing with other, not mixing, but they're hanging out with other just people, families who are just Christian and not necessarily Catholic. And so here, a Catholic child can really understand what sets them apart as Catholics, like how are we unique in terms of our Catholic faith, and they can get that sense. So the section of live out our faith is the last section, which we call Haciendo Discípulos, or in English we call it Project Disciple. These are culminating activities. These are activities that are done at the end of the lesson, and the whole point of these culminating activities is not just to review what they've learned in the preceding pages, but then how do you take this and live it out in your life? How do you take this and make it a part of, how do you integrate it into what was presented and your real life? How do you share this with others? So here's a section of Haciendo Discípulos, and you can see the sections here like that are muestra lo que sabes, or show what you know. So there's little puzzles here where they take what they've learned, usually the vocabulary words or the concepts, and they put it into these small activities that are here in the last section. Now, every chapter of Creemos has these last two culminating pages that you can use at the end. Now, they're very dynamic for me. There's three ways I think that you can use these pages at the end of the chapter. Either you can use them as a culminating activity. Let's say you have 5-10 minutes at the end of your lesson, and you say, oh, let's do the Haciendo Discípulo Project Disciple pages. So they do it, maybe you run a little game with them and say the first one that finishes it, I'll give them a pencil or something like that. Somebody joked with me a while back. They said, yeah, pencils is something you used to give when we were children in the 1980s, 70s. Now kids don't want a pencil as a prize. They want an iPad or something like that. But you give them a prize if they complete the Haciendo Discípulo page. So that's one way to use it. The second way to use it is maybe you send it home as an activity that they can do at home. It's a home activity. And I always try to shy away from the word homework because, again, I don't want faith formation to seem as a school activity. And so I say do this as a family page that you complete at home. Or the third way you can use these pages is as a review for when they come back the following session, as a review of what they learned the week before. And again, I would do it more as a game activity, like let's see who finishes this first. Maybe you do it as a whole class. Again, if you get the ebook and you're able to project this on the screen, you can do it as a whole class activity, and you guys can review what they learned the last time. So these are ways to really integrate what they're learning in their faith and be able to use it when they're working with it. So here's another part of the page. Now these pages, we intentionally put the 6 tasks of catechesis. So each one of these sections really corresponds to one of the 6 tasks. I guess that's another way of saying that each one of, like, if it's the question corner, it's about the know part of the 6 tasks. This section here looks like it's all about that know task of the 6 tasks. But some of them are about prayer. Some of them are about celebrating our faith. Some of them are about choosing. So they each one correspond to the 6 tasks of catechesis. Which brings us to technology and catechesis. I've really been interested in reading up a lot about Generation C. Generation C, as far as I'm reading right now, is a generation that is, I think the literature is calling them under the age of 25. So they were born later than 1990. And maybe I would say that they're even a little bit older than that. Even people that are under the age of 30 might be Generation C. And what Generation C is they all have C adjectives, and there are many of, when you start thinking about it, there are many C adjectives to this generation, but the ones that seem to be most out there in what I've been reading is that they're connected, that they're creative, that they're about community, that they're curious, and that they're looking for content. So they spend their time on some sort of mobile device that's connected to the web, either via cellular or Wi-Fi, but they're connected. And of course, social media is really defining this Generation C, because they don't spend but a moment off social media. And of course, social media in its various forms. You know, a lot of us, I think, are familiar with Facebook, but I think this Generation C is maybe not on, maybe they are on Facebook, they have a presence there, but that's not their main presence. You know, they're no longer on Facebook. And the reason they're no longer on Facebook is because we're all on, us adults, us old fogies are all on Facebook, and they don't want to be anywhere where we are at, so they've moved on. I think Twitter is still a big place for them, but there are other places, you know, Instagram and Vines and Kick, and there's a whole bunch. And if you have international, if you have people that live in other countries like our bilingual children do, the biggest way that they connect is with that WhatsApp, which is more of a texting app. But a lot of people, for example, I know my family in Mexico, they use that WhatsApp a lot. So this is a very connected group, and when we're doing catechesis with this group, we really need to be conscious of what's out there in terms of what can we use for catechesis, and to not use technology, because I do run across people who are technology naysayers or deniers. Is that another way to say, no, I'm not going to use any technology in catechesis. I'm going to create, I'm going to have my catechetical session be an oasis where it's, you know, tech-free. Well, if you do that, I think we risk alienating this Generation C. And so I think instead of saying no to technology in catechesis, I think we should learn to incorporate technology in catechesis. But what I'm finding very curiously, and I know I put all these C words up there that they're all into, what I'm finding is that Generation C is missing Christ. I don't see them being very Christ-centered. And as a matter of fact, one of the issues that really concerns me about social media is that a person in an interpersonal discussion with you, in a live, you know, flesh-to-flesh person discussion, is, you know, can be one person, but then they get on social media and they're another person. Like they turn mean and hateful and say mean things about people. And I know this because you read some of the comments that people write on some of the articles on social media or on Facebook, and you go like, wow, why is that person so different from when you talk about them, when you talk to them in person? And so there's some sort of bridge gap. And so I'm wondering if discipleship is extending to Generation C and into their life on the web or their life in social media. And I think that's a big wake-up call for us as catechists. How do we extend discipleship onto their social media? And so one of the things that I wanted to show you is how we at Sadlier have responded to that. And of course, you've seen our website, which includes many samples that you can have. But what I wanted to take you more to is to Sadlier Religion, where you will see our Creemos website, and we'll show you. So here's where you access it. This is the access site. Now, this is changing, and so in the months ahead, it may not be live here, but we will continue having the same content. But you open a section like this, and you can see Creemos right here. You go into Creemos, and this is the section that you get when you go into Creemos. Let's say I'm working with second graders, and of course I'm the catechist, and I just want to see everything. So I'm going to go into Creemos. So here is what opens up when you open up the Creemos page. I think it's still adjusting because that little menu should be over on the left-hand side. But these are activities for second grade, for segundo curso. And if you go in here, for example, you see our worksheets that are connected to Creemos. And one of my favorite things to tell catechists is if you open this page, let's say chapter 15, and you open the worksheet, And so the worksheet opens up. Let's see if I can get it to open up. It must be here somewhere. Oh, there it is. So here is the worksheet for chapter, and this is a gratitude, card in gratitude, a letter of gratitude that we do for the gifts that God has given us, that we're supposed, that people, that second graders in chapter 15 are supposed to do. One of the things that I'm telling catechists is take this link up here and copy it, collect your parents' emails, and when you're ready, weekly, write them a little email, you know, kind of maybe a one-paragraph email saying, in your religious education class with your child today, we talked about this topic and that topic, maybe 2 lines, and then embed the link to this website where they can go and download the PDF of the worksheet so that then they can do the worksheet at home and then bring it to you on the following week. And that's a way to use technology, albeit a very basic technology, with them in catechesis. Also on this website, as you can see, we have stuff for your whiteboards in case you have the, not the whiteboards, but the smart boards. Here there's various activities for that. There's also interactive games that they can use, and here are some of the, like for Unit 1, there's 3 games that they're able to do. If you want more worksheets and more guides for review, they can go into this section here and be able to do that. And of course, the lives of the saints, La Vida de los Santos. As you can see, what I really like about these, so there's St. Ambrose, San Ambrosio, with his whole basic information, and a little article about St. Ambrose. But then, really interestingly enough, it gives a activity for intermediate children. So I'm thinking maybe 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8th grade, and then an activity for primary grade, so 4th grade and below, that they can do around the saint. And so this is all on our website, and you can access it for free. But what I really like about this section is the liturgical, the liturgy of the word. So here's the liturgy of the word that you can access, and this is completely free. So I guess this week is 19th of April, and here's the liturgy. It is the, of course you know, is the 3rd Sunday of Easter, and here's a way that you can do a little lesson on the liturgy of the word with your children. There's a reflection, and there's also activities for young kids and for intermediate kids that you can do with some discussion questions on each one of the readings. And again, this is all on We Believe Religion, and then you got to go into the Creemos link so that you can use this. There's a little worksheet at the end there that they can even do after they're done reflecting on the faith. So those are all activities that are available to you on our website, which is the creemosweb.com website that gives you a lot of that information. And again, that's putting the technology in for this Generation C. And of course, there's other technology out there, but I think we need to be very conscious of using that. So that's basically the presentation. I do see that there is a question. Let me see if I can read that question.
I can read it for you if that will help,
okay.
Victor.
Okay.
Thank you for your presentation. Norma Road, hola Victor. I had the opportunity to meet you here in El Paso at the annual Catechist Conference. I believe it was about 2 years ago. Anyway, I know one or two catechists that have been in catechesis far too long and refuse to get updated. How can you tell them they need to change? And then the second question, this will probably be the first one to answer though. What grade is the book you used where the 10 Commandments were shown?
Oh, let me go back to that slide and see if I can figure that out. And I can...
I'll grab one off the shelf.
Yeah, I cannot figure out what grade level this is. It doesn't have... it's just a screenshot of the actual page. It doesn't have all the bottom matter.
Okay, I'll go for conceive real quick. Alrighty.
But yeah, let me take on that other question, because that just came up yesterday in a presentation I was doing in San Bernardino. And I know you're seeing the Sacred Heart of Jesus because I'm going to talk about him in just a second. So here's my indirect answer to that very direct question. I think the way to do that is to recruit younger catechists into your catechetical program. And what I mean by this is, again, I think it's what Pope Francis is doing. Pope Francis is teaching by example. And when you see him do those things, you think, wow, every Catholic should be doing that and should be kind of emulating that. And it calls us to question how many of us are really doing that. You know, he built showers and bathrooms for the homeless at the Vatican. How many of us are building some sort of shelter for homeless in our own homes? Yet, I think that's what he's calling us to do, or to do something similar. So it's by example that he's teaching. So in answering your question, if you recruit younger catechists and those younger catechists start to show older catechists how they are approaching catechesis in their own unique way, I think that helps them both grow at both ends of the spectrum. And how do you recruit younger catechists? That's a bigger question. To me, you work with your confirmation classes. You know, I mean, I think I say this in kind of a joking way, but go at the end of that confirmation liturgy, go stand outside the door there of the church and get a sign-up sheet and get them all recruited into becoming catechists. And maybe the catechist liturgy is a little bit too late to work with that. But I really feel strongly about all our sacraments. We don't do mystagogia with our sacraments. We don't do follow-up with our sacraments. And yet, RCIA calls us to do that with all our sacraments. From baptism, through First Communion, through reconciliation, and of course, confirmation. We don't do follow-up, and I do think that this is one way that we can do follow-up, and that is by saying to them, hey, would you like to become a catechist? You know, we'll train you. We'll, you know, you'll work maybe as an assistant for a year or so, and you know, they'll be nervous, but you know, in your charming ways, try to get them to say, yeah, I'm interested in finding out more about this and working with them. And again, I think once the older catechists start to see how these younger catechists, these Generation C catechists operate, I think you'll see that they will really help out with your program. So I don't know if Debbie was able to get the page numbers.
I'm still looking. I just asked Norma to send me her email address, but I'm still looking. But I do have another question, and this involves using Creemos with parents who are Spanish-speaking and with children who prefer to speak English, either because of peer pressure or because of just the way they are. What is your recommendation on that, and how do you incorporate family faith formation?
So is the question about how do we bring in the parents into the process?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So I really think Creemos is really situated very well to be able to do this. There are various components like the Respondemos, the Haciendo Discípulos, and then on the website, I don't know if I showed you that clearly, but on the website, there's a tab for parents. Let me see if I can get back to this website here. So here's the website. There's a tab here where, and it's not showing up right now, but it does exist. There's a tab for parents. Oh, here it is, Familia. And you can see here in this tab for Familia, it's each grade level. And if you go into one of these sections, there are stuff that they can do at home, whether it's the game, the study guides, or the lives of the saints. So there are ways that they can incorporate themselves through that. So there's that. The other piece that I've always talked about is you can also have them be a part of your catechetical lesson. Now, you got to consult your safe environment regulations about this, but I always say have families sponsor each week of the catechetical lesson. So if, let's say, there's 20 weeks or 26 weeks in your catechesis program, put a calendar out and say, would each family sign up to sponsor one of those. And it depends on, it can range on what it means in your parish. For example, it could mean that you're just praying for our group that week. Or it could mean that you're not praying and maybe you're present. Again, for them to be in the class, that's a safe environment issue that you need to consult your diocese. Or it could mean that you provide us with the supplies that we need for the class. I mean, it could mean a variety of things, and that way parents are involved and they continue to be involved in the catechetical process. So there's a variety of ways, and I think really Creemos gives you a lot of opportunities. Maybe this is a good time also to share with you guys, and this is something new we're working on. We are working on a revision of Creemos for January 2016, which will really incorporate the family in a very intentional and meaningful way. In other words, we're going to shift a lot of the pieces that are done in the catechetical session to the family and into the home, so that when they come to the parish for catechetical sessions, they'll come with a lot of the understanding already in place and then reinforced at the home. And so we're very excited about this new revision. Some of the details and some of the actual pieces of it are not firmed up yet. They're a little fluid right now, but that's the focus that we're going into doing some intentional family catechesis in the new Creemos when it comes out early in 2016.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question, and then just a favor to ask you to show where folks can preview the books online. So I'll go into this next question from, and I apologize if I say this wrong. It's not Victor. I'm not even going to. Miss De Los Reyes. Our parish offers an hour-long faith formation class on Sundays for our children on K-5. Do you think the Creemos chapter will be completely covered in that time? If not, what would you recommend that our catechists focus on for that hour?
Yes, and actually, I've heard the, I don't know if it's criticism or feedback reverse. I've heard there's so much in Creemos that they cannot get to do it in the hour or hour and a half. And I don't take that as a criticism necessarily, because I was a high school teacher, and I'll tell you, I used to sit down and plan a whole bunch of activities and questions and all this stuff, especially when I was a starting out teacher, and I thought, oh my God, I have like 2 hours worth of content here for class. You know, maybe class was 50 minutes or whatever the case may be. And then I'd go into class and do that lesson, and it was done in 10 minutes. And then I'd sit there going like, uh-oh, now what do I do? So I appreciate, from a teaching point of view, having more stuff in Creemos rather than having less or very little stuff, because in case I do go through it really fast, I know that there's more stuff for me to do there. So there is plenty of information, and not just in Creemos, again, but also on the web that you can use in case, let's say you do go, let's say you are a great catechist and your students are super students, and for some reason when you teach a lesson, a chapter from Creemos, they go through it within that hour and you have time left over and you want something else, there's also the web resources that you can go to as well.
Okay, thank you. That's a great answer, and it's so true. Alrighty, we are at the 1 hour, or almost at the 1 hour closure, and we thank everyone for joining us. But before we do come to closure here, Victor will show you, this is our website, sadlier.com/religion. When you go onto this website, you'll see, well, one is a lot of valuable downloads that Victor had mentioned earlier, but the row of parish oh, here's your downloads, and then it goes into the blogs. And all of this material is free. We really invite you to join us and look at the resources there. But this line of parish programs, school programs, sacrament, bilingual, and materiales en español. On the bilingual, and you click on the Learn More, you'll come up with products that we have available in bilingual format. And also, I must say, I think it was about 1973 we came out with our first bilingual catechetical program, Jesus nos dice. But when you then, under the book cover, is the title, and then in red is View Product Details. So when you click on the View Product Details, you'll get to obviously another window where there are some downloads, and the screen, here we are, View Online Samples, or even to over Request a Sample. But to view online samples, if you wanted to, if you're in the evening going over your materials and wondering, what some things look like, just click on it at the grade level you want, and you'll come up with a presentation, and it's an entire lesson. It's not abbreviated versions. It's very comprehensive materials here. So we invite you to view the website for your samples. There was another button, Find a Representative, or you can contact your local representative, and they would be happy to have material sent to you, or to meet with you face-to-face. Alrighty? Victor, on that note, let's see, there are no other questions.
I have a little closing prayer.
Yes, that's what I was
It's actually not a close.
Perfect. Alrighty.
Okay. Yeah, I have a little closing reflection, and I don't know what the name is, but Señora de los Reyes, Missy, I think it is. I see your last question. We'll respond to it off the webinar because we are at the 1 hour mark. But let me just leave you with this image of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. The Sacred Heart of Jesus to me is a very meaningful devotion because it's so dynamic. The reason that the Sacred Heart is exposed like that he's sharing, see his open arms, how he's sharing the Sacred Heart of Jesus with that? I think he's giving us his Sacred Heart is what I see in this image. So then I have the Sacred Heart of image in my heart. Not the image, but the heart. I have the heart. And then I can turn to my fellow friends and Christians and share that Sacred Heart of image with them, that Sacred Heart. And so we're hoping that Creemos is like the Sacred Heart of Jesus, that we're able to not only have it within ourselves, but then share it with those that we are catechizing. And so with that reflection and with that thought, I leave you, and thank you for joining us this morning, afternoon, for this Creemos and Discipleship webinar. Debbie?
All right. Thank you again, everybody. We look forward to you joining us again. A little later this month, we have John Collins doing a presentation on spiral curriculum, which all of our materials, our basals, follow a very strong spiral curriculum format. In May, Kathy Hendricks is having a webinar on how to lead a retreat. It's called What Me Lead a Retreat. And Kathy, in her own way, I can assure you it will be an enjoyable presentation. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us. Feel free to contact Victor or myself, and we'll get back to you. Thank you, and God bless. Alrighty, bye-bye.